Good morning. How you doing? Just a couple minutes before 8 o'clock on a Monday. I know it's a Monday. Happy Monday is not an oxymoron, not around here. It's the 28th of October. And I promised you a fall picture. Now, I was going to go out to Prairie Rose State Park and get some pics this weekend, and I just didn't do it. I had a client call on Saturday. Sunday is a lot of church, but I did get caught up on some football in the afternoon, so that's my excuse. But thankfully, I live in a beautiful place here in western Iowa. And so this is right out my front door. I just thought I'd just snap a picture right out my front door and show you some blue spruce and a couple of the hardwood trees that are turning colors too. So it's beautiful fall around here. The leaves are starting to fall, and so we're getting past peak, but it's been another beautiful fall in western Iowa. Hazards today look like this. We've got some big changes coming, and we're going to go through all of it for sure. November is going to look a lot different than October did. October, very boring, very warm, and it's going to get pretty active here first half of November at least, and we'll see after that. So, hazards for today, we're way up in northern Washington. Winter weather advisories way up there. California into Arizona, dealing with some wind advisories. So be advised, it's going to be windy. That's going to be the story for the plains, but we'll get there in a second. Across Nevada, Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, parts of Montana. It's winter weather, so we're looking at winter weather advisories mostly here. And wouldn't be surprised to see some winter storm watches. There's a freeze watch up there near northwestern Arizona. And then we get into the plains. Here comes the wind, high wind watches, and red flag warnings are up for the southern and central plains right now. Now, what's not on here is we have some. I believe it's a high wind watch for parts of. Well, no, there it is. That's in southern Nebraska. So that is certainly depicted here. We could see 50-mile-an-hour winds in Lincoln tomorrow. But when you get into even western Iowa, Omaha, we have some wind advisories up here too. So just for high fire danger. So be careful there. Fog is back again for Louisiana, now also into Mississippi and also central Tennessee. And then further on the East Coast, it's freezing, freeze warnings. Now down into Virginia and Maryland and Delaware and southern New Jersey, parts of Pennsylvania, and a little bit of New York. So that's what's going on with the hazards. I do want to show you the pattern change that is coming. Verily, verily, I say unto you, a time is coming and is already here where the pattern is changing. So this is basically the current upper weather winds, and you see a big ridge in the middle of the country. And we see a big dip already starting in the west. Watch this area. It's going to dive south and into the plains, and we're going to see a few of these over time. So I'm just going to start with today. There's our first low diving into the Four Corners. That gets us to Wednesday, and then it's going to eject into the plains. And behind that, we're going to see our cold front for Halloween. So this is Halloween, middle of the day. So those upper weather winds already dipping far south in the west and then ejecting into the plains. And then what do we have behind that? We have another one. This one's not going as far south, but, well, I stand corrected, dipping all the way down into the Mexican border. And then that ejects into the plains. And of course, you can imagine showers and storms coming with that. And then another one way down south into Mexico, ejecting into Texas and the plains. And then we see our little hurricane here, tropical storm or hurricane, hurting nobody off the East Coast. So that's good news. And then a big ridge for the west and a big dip for the East Coast. This is by the 8th. So just much more active instead of our boring October. We get into the 10th, another wave, and then out past the GFS to the 12th, we see another big dip in the West Coast. So just to give you an idea of what kinds of changes are coming, and to talk about those winds mainly in the plains, but also for the Four Corners. So these are the winds today. Now this is 10 meters high, so 30 feet above the deck, but it gives you an idea of what those surface winds will look like. So we'll kind of ignore the speeds for a little bit because these are not going to be the exact speeds at the surface, but this gives you an idea. Very gusty winds for the Four Corners, and then just moving out of the south from West Texas, North Texas, Oklahoma into Kansas, and fairly decent when you get up into the Midwest, Ohio, Minnesota, but dry. And then tomorrow, those winds really crank up even further north into Iowa and Nebraska and Kansas, and in from the Four Corners, from the Southern Plains. So just to give you an idea, today's winds, tomorrow's winds, really cranking ahead of that big trough in the west, and then we've got that wind moving from the south ahead of the front, and then the front's going to move through and change everything. So let's talk about that. But first, we'll talk about today's surface, and there's your high fire danger already. Here, critical fire danger from parts of the Texas Panhandle into Oklahoma and Kansas ahead of our system in the west. Big system in the west, rain or snow depending on elevation for much of the western half of the country, rain along the coast. Meanwhile, it's showers for the Great Lakes, a few showers for Texas, especially along the Gulf Coast, and a few showers along the Florida Atlantic coast up the southeast coast into the mid-Atlantic. Today's temperature anomaly is much above average with those southerly breezes into the plains, so it's going to be very warm here, very much above average. Around average East Coast and below average with our trough in the west, and those highs look like this. A lot of 40s and some 50s for the west coast, especially up in the northwest. A little warmer California, 60s for the central valleys, but otherwise 40s and 50s for the west. Now, desert southwest still, 90 for Phoenix, but 90 for Amarillo and Lubbock. Sorry, you guys. Upper 80s for a lot of Texas into Oklahoma, even into Kansas, again with those southerly winds on the strong side. 70s, upper 70s, persisting into Nebraska and Iowa and southern Minnesota. So very warm in the center part of the country, hanging on to 50s and some 40s way up in the northeast. Tomorrow's surface. Here comes our system. Here comes our front, moving from the northern plains into the upper Midwest. With that, a few showers ahead of it. Behind it, rain and snow, heavy snow for Wyoming, Colorado, Utah. And so this is like straight up snow in Nevada, Idaho, Montana as well. It's getting to be that time of year. But, rain or snow depending on elevation for a lot of the west otherwise. But that's rain mixed with snow for North Dakota, South Dakota. Of course, the Black Mountains with some heavy snow possible in South Dakota. So there we go. And then we get up into the northeast. It's raining and maybe some snow mixed in for Maine and New Hampshire. And a few showers in the plains ahead of our front. There'll be some severe weather possible too. So as the front moves through excuse me, later in the day, a chance of severe storms, just marginal, slight chance, but from Oklahoma through Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, South Dakota, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. Temperatures for tomorrow, those temperature anomalies tomorrow, much above average into the Midwest and the upper Midwest, 30 degrees above average for Minneapolis. Yikes. And still teens to 20 above average for much of the rest of the plains into the Midwest. Still around average East Coast, although a little bit more below average for the Northeast and much below average for the western half of the country. Starting out the day tomorrow, low temperature wise, it's chilly western half of the country with lows, a lot of 20s here, even some teens, but 40s too along the coast and in California. Some 50s even for the desert southwest, so a cool, refreshingly cool start, relatively speaking. Northern plains in the 40s, but with those southerly winds blowing overnight, keeping temperatures in the 60s from southern Minnesota through Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, Arkansas, into Texas, and Louisiana, Mississippi. So that's a warm start for tomorrow, but kind of chilly mid-Atlantic up into the northeast. As you get further into the northeast, we got a lot of 30s, even some 20s here. Highs tomorrow, cooler northeast, way northeast you have to get to see the 50s and 40s, but some 60s even, New York State down into Pennsylvania. And for the West, that's where the cold stuff is. But that cold front's starting to make some progress in the northern plains. And, as we get into, say Minnesota, kind of cut in half. You got 70s to near 80 for the southern part of Minnesota, and you have 50s, 50s and 60s for the northern part. And, 80 degrees for Omaha, but that's going to be changing quickly. But again, strong southerly winds in the plains, 80s all the way down into Texas and into the southeast. Some 70s though, mid-Atlantic, and near 80, say for Columbus, Ohio. For those 48-hour precipitation, looks like this. With our system in the west, we're going to see a lot of rain. This will be rain for Wyoming, up to an inch, maybe even two, isolated as you get into the mountains of South Dakota. And then, some of the mountains of Colorado could see a lot of snow, rain, lower elevations, and even into Utah. Quite a bit of rain here. Also into the Pacific Northwest, of course, the western parts of Oregon, Washington, parts of Northern California. And we see some rain up there for Vermont, New Hampshire, New York State, Maine, even parts of Pennsylvania. Here's where it's going to fall as snow. So mainly higher elevations in the west. So California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Utah. The heaviest snow would be southwestern Colorado again. Could see a couple feet here in some places. But, half a foot to a foot of snow with elevation across much of the higher elevations of the west in the next 2 days. As we get into Wednesday, that front making progress through the plains. And so, we're looking for rain mixed with snow, South Dakota, Minnesota, North Dakota, Nebraska, Colorado. Straight up snow for Wyoming, Colorado. Pacific Northwest, another system moving in with rain on the coast, rain or snow depending on elevation for California, Nevada, Oregon, Washington, Idaho. Our severe weather out ahead of the front. North Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri. We'll show you that here in a second with scattered showers otherwise. And here is that severe weather. A slight risk from Dallas-Fort Worth through Oklahoma City, through Tulsa, up through Kansas City. And then the marginal risk goes all the way down to San Antonio and Houston almost, into Little Rock, and all the way up through Des Moines and even into, places like, southern Wisconsin, not quite Madison. But, a chance of severe weather ahead of that front in the plains on Wednesday. And our temperatures on Wednesday. Here comes that cooler air heading further east. So that pocket of coldest air is now into western Nebraska, into Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, northern Arizona, northern New Mexico, and even another system moving into the Oregon coast with teens below average. And then much above average hanging in there for the Great Lakes, Midwest, Ohio Valley, and further to the east. As the east has been cooler than average, is now going to warm up as the west really cools off. These highs look like this for the Midwest, for the Ohio Valley, still hanging on to 80s, still hanging on to 80s for much of Texas into the southeast, but 70s mid-Atlantic and up the coast, turning into 60s and 50s up there in Maine. But here comes the cool stuff for the northern plains, a lot of 40s for the Dakotas and western Nebraska into eastern Colorado. And even where I live, we're going to see 50s to near 60 for highs, probably 60s in the morning, and then temperatures dropping during the day in western Iowa. So Wednesday is going to be an interesting day with that front blowing through. And we'll show you the Halloween forecast coming up, because that cold front is going to make a big difference for a lot of people. And then it's going to help, the pattern's going to flip. All right, let's take a look at the GFS. And we'll go through this starting this morning. Oh dear, what did I click on? Oh, I took a sounding. How do I fix that? Well, let's see if I can. There we go. All right, we get to see how the sausage is made this morning. I told you, no edits. All right. Perfect. All right. Starting with this morning. Here we go with our western system invading into Utah and into Colorado with rain and snow. This gets us to Tuesday at 12Z. So this would be tomorrow morning or tonight at midnight ish. And you can see those winds increasing from the southern plains into the Midwest and Great Lakes as we go. As we get further into tomorrow, we see our snow for parts of Utah, Colorado, especially Wyoming, and rain out ahead of that for the Dakotas. And then as we go further into the day on Wednesday, this is Tuesday night around midnight, here comes our cold front with some snow possible into the Dakotas, back towards Utah and Colorado. And it's rain, showers, and storms out ahead of it, our severe threat here as we go. And then really some storms popping up here from south of Omaha and west of Omaha. I live right there. So I'm going to be really on the edge of this line of storms. I'm hoping we don't miss out like last time it formed just to the east, just to the east. And we didn't get anything. So it's going to be, right on that margin again. This is Wednesday morning. And then another front moving into the Pacific Northwest with some heavy rain along the coast. Then here comes our showers and storms, our possibility of some severe weather that we talked about. So near Wisconsin, getting into eastern Iowa, of course, down into Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, and even trailing into Texas. As this front marches eastward and the cold air dives south and east, this gets us into Wednesday night, and we're starting to move now into Halloween morning. This is Halloween morning as that front continues to go east. This 540 line, again, the demarcation between rain and snow normally, but it's also just an indication of some of that colder air. So starting to get into northern Nebraska, northwestern Iowa. So some pretty cool air and a pretty big change in temperatures from much above average for the plains to, we're going to get below average. And then these showers and storms continue to march eastward as we go through Halloween day. And this gets us pretty close to trick-or-treat time right here. And we'll show you this map again when we go through the Halloween forecast. But so here's the area where you could see some rain for trick-or-treat time. And then our new system in the Pacific Northwest could be some rain and snow for Oregon and Northern California. And then much cooler on the plains all the way down into Texas. Now let's go further into time because remember we've got several dips that are moving into the west and then ejecting into the plains. So, several rounds of rain for Texas. This is Saturday and then ejecting into the plains. So Saturday night could see some rain back in Iowa, Missouri, Nebraska, Oklahoma, and Texas, some big storms and heavy rain. And so, a lot of us that have been dry here are going to start to make up for some of that. And that is really good news as we get into Sunday. Rain for parts of the Dakotas, Minnesota, Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Texas, into Illinois and Wisconsin into Texas. A little bit of light snow here for parts of the interior Northwest. As we get into Monday now, another round of showers and storms into the Midwest, moving into the Great Lakes, and trailing showers and storms, Arkansas, into Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, and another big round of big storms for North Texas, into Oklahoma, into Arkansas. So, and they need it. This gets us into Tuesday now. You can see, again, another big round of showers and storms. Texas up into the Ohio Valley along the Mississippi River, marching eastward. Here comes our hurricane right here. Still keeping an eye on that. It's getting kind of close to the southeast again in this forecast by the 7th. And of course, we're pretty far out here. So we have to be careful about, saying there will be a hurricane off the southeast coast on the 7th. I mean, that we're getting into the land of uncertainty here for sure. So colder air now for the Northeast as we get into the second week of November, and another system for the Pacific Northwest. So you can see the first half of November is just going to be much more active Here comes another cold front for the plains. Now, previous years it could be worse, right? We don't see any huge snowstorms, for the plains or for the Great Lakes or even the East yet. But certainly the West and the higher elevations mainly getting pretty active with some, I would say fall-like weather, but you could call it winter-like too. Kind of that does, this is the time of year for that stuff to start happening. All right, 6 to 10 day temperatures reflecting those troughs moving into the West Coast. So that's where it'll be cooler than average. Much of the country, especially the eastern half, a really good chance of being above average on temperatures. But the precipitation, just a great chance of above average precipitation. Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, getting into southern Nebraska, parts of Missouri, and then even, a greater than 50% chance of above average precipitation all the way into the Great Lakes from Southern California to the Great Lakes. So this is great news for the center part of the country. All right, let's talk Halloween. Temperature anomalies for Halloween, much above average for the Northeast especially, like 20 degrees above average for, say, New York State, Pennsylvania. So, really warm here. Finally, temperatures getting knocked back down to average for the plains and Great Lakes. And then much below average, say, for Northern California into Oregon. Well, 10 to 15 degrees below average here, and parts of Wyoming too. How do those temperatures look around trick-or-treat time? These are the highs on Halloween. 50s, Iowa. I live here, so that's why I go straight to that, right? 40s for, Minnesota up into the Dakotas, Wisconsin. So this is kind of the cool spot for the plains. But that cold front, bringing 60s down into, upper 50s to near 60s, say for Kansas, mid 60s for Oklahoma, and even 60s for West Texas, even though that ugly blood red depicts 70s and upper 60s. But anyway, cooling off even down to Lubbock, Texas, 60s for highs. So cooling off from there for trick-or-treat time. Well, it's not bad. And for the West Coast, it'll be cool, of course. And for the Southwest, it'll be warm. That precipitation map again, we see that swath as that front moves into, say, the Ohio River Valley, eastern Great Lakes, down through Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, Louisiana, East Texas. That's kind of our chance for rain and even some thunderstorms for trick-or-treaters. So this is the area to watch out for dodging showers if you're going out. And then in the Pacific Northwest, rain for the Oregon coast into the Willamette Valley, snow for the higher elevations, and down into Northern California and up into Washington State. So that is our tour of the fork. There's so much going on all of a sudden. And I would say that's great news. So things are going to be interesting in the weather as we get into November. So, and of course, we'll keep you posted right here. That's what we do. I super appreciate you being here. And we'll keep her going. We'll see you tomorrow right here on the Weather Mic.